Put the first slide up, Mpumi.
Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the Bpesa HR forum. If you don't mind just entering your name and your company and role in the chat, just to say hello, name, company, and role in the chat. If you want to speak in Hindi, Zulu, Venda, to greet us in Afrikaans, please feel free. Just want to know who's in the call now. In the chat box, you can either say good morning, goeiemorgen, dumelang, nda, konnichiwa, in the chat box, please, just to know who's here. We still wait for other people to log in as well. We've got about 50 people that are joining the session. So just give some people some time just to log in. Good morning to those who've just joined now. We're just waiting for others to join. Just introduce your name and surname in the chat and the company that you're coming from. We've got about 20 people that have already joined. We'll just give others just 1 minute and we'll start at 10:05 sharp. I'm aware that some people might be having load shedding at the moment. And thank you for coming to our HR forum.
Sorry, Samkelo, I've just noted there's an issue with the chat, but you can type in the Q&A section. Apologies for that.
Okay. Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, Kura, for making us aware. Hey, Leanne, pleased to see you. Lee, welcome. Natalie, welcome. Colleagues, it's exactly 10:05. If we can start. Good morning, goeiemorgen. So in Bpesa, we've got quite a number of companies joining us. A special welcome also to our suppliers and vendors. My name is Samkelo. My surname is Blom. I'm also a representative for Bpesa in the Western Cape. I also serve in EXCO for the human resources portfolio as well. I will be your facilitator and your MC today. We've got quite a packed program, also a practical program as well. Mpumi is behind the scenes helping us with the slides, and also Samantha is also in the background as well. We've got very key people presenting, also a poll and a discussion as well. So without wasting time, let me give over to Rashni, our CEO, who's going to welcome us and just give us a context about this session. Special welcome to everyone. If you do have load shedding, please, you can just, when you can just connect again as well. Thank you. So without wasting time, Rashni, over to you, Sissy.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It feels like it's been a while since we got together to discuss one of the most important resources in our sector, and that is our people. Currently, we from a sector perspective, we are definitely facing unprecedented growth. There's lots of new entrants coming into South Africa, and there's a lot of growth amongst our existing BPOs. And that leaves us with a good problem to have. And that is, being able to effectively and efficiently manage our people resources. So today's session is actually all about the people, and we're going to touch on various different aspects that is key to Bpesa and key to the GBS master plan as well. So we're obviously going to speak around inclusive hiring and the fact that we've all committed to 30% of inclusive hiring. We're currently sitting at 22%. And I think it's important that we start putting more effort into our inclusive hiring practices within our organizations. We've got Tracy on the call who's going to be speaking to us more around that, more around impact sourcing, because I think with the kind of demand, it's important that we are able to positively impact, career paths for young individuals, as well as creating leadership development programs, specialist skills, etc. So we also have Shona that's coming on later to be able to share some of our ideas around leadership development for the sector, and the fact that we need to actually start fast tracking the future skills, the leadership program, as well as future skills. So future skills is a digital platform that Bpesa launched in May. And my team may correct me, but I don't think we actually had an HR forum since the launch of that Future Skills platform. And that is basically currently being rolled out. And there's a number of operators, some of you on the call, that have already had access to demos with regards to the Future Skills platform, and how could you all actually participate to be able to create impactful digital skills for the sector. The platform obviously also provides you with an opportunity to reskill and upskill your existing workforce as well. And then, the other area, which we're not quite going to be covering today, but I just thought it is going to be very important for us to just speak about it, maybe just alert the panel to the fact that Bpesa, as part of the master plan, has also committed to what we call the Decent Work framework. And this is run by the International Labour Organization. And we actually have a representative from the Public-Private Growth Initiative that is going to be attending this forum, where there's leaders from across the globe that discuss labor practices, etc. And there are four sort of key areas under the Decent Work framework. The first one being the rights of employees, the second one being job creation and skills. And then there's social protection, as well as social dialogue. And that's where things like, unions, etc., come into play as well. So I think it's very important that we become more proactive as a sector, and start preparing, for us to be able to adopt and abide by new regulations and new policies that are coming into play to be able to support the growth of the sector. So that's something that Samkelo will definitely diarize for our next session, for us to basically maybe look at how do we unpack this decent work framework for our sector, and how do we actually commit to codes of good practice, governance, etc. And the other thing that I actually also want to just highlight, and I'm sure that Tracy will also cover it in her session, is the fact that, we've got such excellent talent within our sector, and we're really looking forward to showcasing that talent at the National GBS Conference, which is coming up at the end of, the week of the 7th of November. And we would obviously like people on the call to encourage your management to nominate individuals to be recognized during our awards, as well as giving them a platform to be able to chat and engage with investors, etc. So that's the other element, I think, of HR that we really need to make sure we focus, and that's where the value add comes, to be able to show people. I see one of the agenda items speaks to, how do we make GBS sexy again? And I think that is something that would definitely be able to support us in that strategy of becoming employers of choice, becoming a sector of choice, and being able to showcase opportunities to young people that may be, a bit reluctant to enter this particular sector. So in a nutshell, I mean, that's a bit of an overview in terms of what exactly we're looking to share and chat about this morning. We're hoping for it to be a bit of an interactive session as well. So looking forward to hearing from you all. And if there's anything that I haven't covered as some of our priorities, please do feel free to also, make some notes in the Q&A so that we can address it as we proceed. But I think the highlight of this morning that I'm also really looking forward to is our international speaker. So I think that would be fantastic for all of us. So thank you, Samkelo, and back to you.
Excellent, and thank you very much, Rashni. It's good to have you in this session, and thank you just for the highlights in terms of what is in our stable and what things are core and what things are critical. Samantha, I see now that the chat box is the chat is working, so thank you for assisting us about that. Colleagues, as we start, just curious to see what are your expectations as attendees and delegates to this session, and you can just unmute and just share. What are you hoping to get out of this session now that Resh has said and we did put the theme? So just unmute yourself, just name and surname and then the company you are coming from. Hopefully there's no one coming from EXCO. I doubt if any of us will be able to listen to you if you are coming from EXCO. Your name and the company, and what are you looking for from out of this session, colleagues? Who wants to start?
Please raise your hand if you have a question or a comment.
I'm just asking for expectations as attendees. What are you hoping? Yes, thanks, Petro. You are a star. Petro, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. I learned yesterday that that's a cool way to say to a person they are on mute, is when you say, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. Over to you, Petro.
Thank you, Samkelo. Yes, this is Petra. I am from Boulder. We are based in Cape Town. And not real expectation. It's our first time that we are attending a Bpesa forum like this, so really open to hear the discussion points that's going to be had here and learning from each other.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Petro. And I'm hoping that learning will also definitely take place during this session. Other people who are present, as just raise your hand. What are you hoping? What are your interests out of this session today? Anyone else? If you are, yep, Felicity Havenga, you may go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, ma'am.
Great. So my name is Felicity Havenga, and I'm from a training provider called Clinical Skills Evolution. And this is my first, I've been a member of the Bpesa quite recently. So this is my first HR forum meeting, and I'm just really hoping to find out more about the Bpesa, more about what's going on in the human resource aspect of it. And just really wanting to start engaging with the Bpesa and, you know, becoming more involved in what you do.
Well done. Well done, and thanks for joining us, Felicity. Again, as you said, just to learn more about Bpesa, and this is your first one, so you just want to get more exposure, more specifically in the human resources work in Bpesa. Donna Benjamin from says that from Teleperformance, HR manager, is on the chart, is hoping to gain data, would prefer not to speak, please. Okay, Donna, no problem. Understood, okay? But you just want to learn about more insights in what's happening in the sector and also the kind of challenges as well. Thank you very much. Any other human resources people that are here in terms of what are you expecting out of the session? Any other human resources people? Just raise your hand, and what are you hoping forward to gain from this session? As mentioned, we're also going to be running some polls where we're going to be asking you certain questions, and you'll have to choose according to the answers given. And I think this is a very good time, maybe now that I'm not getting the answers and the feedback from the delegates, Mpumi, to start with our first poll. We're meant to start with that during the conversation, but just let's start now with our first poll. The question is going to pop up on the screen. If you don't mind just clicking on the answer that's more relevant to you. Mpumi, can start with the first poll, please. And delegates, please let me know, colleagues, if you can see the poll on your screen.
Samkelo, we've just got a few notes to say that we're losing you a little bit on audio, so it could probably be load shedding. Maybe just drop your camera so that we can rather hear you. The poll should be on screen now for voting.
Yes, the poll is up.
Okay, the poll is there. So there's the poll. Just indicate poll number 1. What is your role, your function in human resources? Are you in the learning space? Are you in the recruitment space? Are you an HRBP or other? And if you just indicate the other, we'll chat about that later. And then the second one, 2.2, what are your company in the organization you work, including Pinnacle, Teleperformance, Boulder, all the people who are here? What are your company's top HR challenges? So if you look in your organization, if you look in your company, which would you say are your top HR challenges? Is something around recruitment, around finding talent, good talent, something around training and development, learning and skills, or do you have a lot of industrial relations, disciplinary issues that you have to deal with, or absenteeism? So it's 2 polls. So please click to the one that is more relevant to you. Question 1, what is your HR? What is your role in HRU sitting here? Then the next one, what are your company's top HR challenges? We'll give you time now just to complete the poll, please. Can we all see the poll? Colleagues, can we all see the poll?
Yes, it was up on the screen.
Excellent. Just go ahead and complete then. We'll give you about 3 to 4 minutes just to complete. Pumi, are you able to show the percentages of numbers as people complete?
Yes, Samkelo, I'm going to be able to do that as soon as they're done sharing their answers. I'm just going to give them 2 minutes, and then after that, I'll share the answers.
Okay, so in the first one, what is your role in HR? 75% of people sitting in this call, attending this meeting, they are human resources business partner, and about 30% are in recruitment, and 20% are in learning and development. Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Because we've got a lot of HR VPs, which will speak nicely to our next guest, whom we're going to be having a conversation with. What are your company top HR challenges around recruitment? I only see recruitment, learning, and then industrial relations. Recruitment seems to be very high. Can you have a discussion around that? What are some of the challenges or some of the pains or some of the issues that you are facing or dealing with when it comes to recruitment? Can we please unpack that, colleagues? Those of you who've chosen recruitment, what are some of the scenarios, some of the challenges, some of the pains, or some of the issues, without naming the company, that you are dealing with when it comes to recruitment? Anyone, just raise your hand and just share with us for the benefit of others. Cindy, thank you, Sissy. Go ahead, Sissy. Cindy, if you are speaking, we cannot hear you. That's a diplomatic way to say you are on mute. Cindy, you have your voice, you have your hand raised, but we cannot hear you. While Cindy is trying to sort out her audio, anyone else who has chosen recruitment as a top challenge who would like to share with us some of the issues, some of the challenges, but also some of the pains when it comes to recruitment? What are you finding hard? What are the obstacles? What are you experiencing in terms of talent, in terms of resources, in terms of skill, in terms of candidates, job spec? So what are the issues under recruitment? Anyone else while we wait for Cindy to go on audio? Lee, you can go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Samkelo. I think one of the challenges we have, and from being in the industry for a while, is we schedule 10 people and 3 people pitch up.
So when you have an interview, Lee, if I hear you correctly, you set up an interview for 5 people. Of the 5, only 3 people attend the interview. Am I right, Lee?
Yes, that's right, Samkelo.
Wow, okay. Thank you. Any other challenges, colleague? I'm just making a note of that. So not all the candidates that we invite to come for interviews actually pitch up for the interview. And then, Lee, if I'm right, that then reduces the pool of candidates that you have to choose from. But also, you don't know what's the reason that they didn't come. Was it transport, or what? Or did they find any other job or anything like that? Am I right?
That's right, Samkelo.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Other people who've chosen recruitment as a pain, as a challenge in their organization. Cindy, please feel free just to speak if your audio is on. Felicity from Pinnacle, please go ahead.
Hi there. So I think, and I'm speaking from a perspective of being a training provider. For us, in terms of recruitment, I'm referring to the recruitment of learners, where we recruit learners for a particular project or a learnership, and then only to find that a big percentage of them are already registered on multiple or on other programs. Wow. And so we find it quite difficult because we spend quite a bit of money and time in getting them registered with a particular CETA, only to, for them to be rejected. So yeah, there are a lot of learners who we recruit who are not kind of honest upfront, and that's spending unnecessary time and money only to have to put them off the program.
And Felicity, thank you for sharing that. And if I may ask, even if we filtered and asked them in the form, please indicate, are you currently busy or have you applied for another learnership? As you said, you think they won't disclose that in advance. What's your feeling? Even if you do ask them, you've applied for this learnership, is there any other learnership you've applied for or you are currently part of? What's your feeling if you ask them that question, even during the interview when you meet them?
Yeah, so we definitely do ask them that, and they actually have to, put that down on the actual application for the learnership. But we do find that there are a lot of people who then are trying to get stipends from more than one project. So it seems to be a bit of an integrity thing because, they've declared on a piece of paper that they are not currently registered on another learnership, when in fact, at the end of the period, we find out that they are. So, I'm not sure if people have just access is too easy to learnerships, or what the solution or why it's happening, but it happens very often. And we do loads of learnerships, and there are always a good percentage of learners who just outright lie on their application forms. So, yeah.
Sure, that's very interesting. So we've got two challenges. One is people being invited to interviews and not all of them pitching up. The next one we have now, we're running learnerships and people already have a learnership, but also they then apply for us. And as Felicity says, they might be wanting to get more stipends in terms of the learnership as well. Lee, if I may just go back to you, out of interest, when you do recruitment, do you perhaps use the SA Youth platform as well, out of interest, Lee?
Yes, we have. We
Okay.
have on a few occasions. Yes, we have.
Okay, no, that's fine. Other people who've chosen recruitment, what are some of your challenges? Those of you who've chosen recruitment in the poll, what are some of your challenges under recruitment? We've got learnership challenges. We've got people not arriving in interviews. Any other challenges around recruitment? We've got quite a number of people in this call. Rashni and Tracy, if you want to respond to any of those, please feel free to come in, colleagues. We did say that this session is an engaging session.
Yes, Samkelo, I think I'll come in. I think one of the things I probably forgot to delve into in the introduction was, this issue around wage inflation and poaching, etc., which is becoming a huge challenge to the sector. So, I think it's very difficult when I understand that your client is asking for scale and you've got to ramp up really quickly. And sometimes the easiest thing to do is to just take experienced people because you know that they would probably hit the ground running. But, that comes with other challenges. And, I've been saying to the industry, when we did call up a session around the leadership crisis, and I said to them, at some point, everybody is going to be a victim to poaching. And we actually need to be cognizant of the broader sort of effects of that in terms of wage inflation. So people are starting out of desperation. They're wanting to get managers in, team leaders in, and they're starting to offer anything between 40 to 80% more than they're currently earning. And that just, it pushes the cost of the business up significantly. It actually, the economic impact of that is that it will make South Africa less competitive. And as a result, we will end up losing the opportunities that we currently have. So we have to be very careful as HR executives on how do we manage that process. There's nothing wrong with the recruitment process that is advertised, and somebody that's looking for career progression may end up applying for it, and then you're giving them an opportunity. But where there are literally teams of people that are moved from one organization to the other, that is completely catastrophic to the sector, because the knock-on effects of that is huge. The other, with people who started doing this, several months ago and offered, these exorbitant packages to move people over from A to B, are now finding that some of these people were not even mature enough for those roles. They were not as competent as you would have expected them to be with the, with regards to the to those roles. So what's the impact of that is that there's poor quality of service that's being delivered, and that affects our value proposition, which is centered around quality. So these are two major issues that, from where we're sitting, with the national lens, it's becoming a massive problem, more especially in the Western Cape as well as in KZN. And I would really love us to have, a discussion and a debate around this, and ultimately the responsibility for that lies with us as HR practitioners. How do we make sure that we prevent these things from happening? And that is wage inflation, as well as the quality of service, because of people that may not necessarily be at the maturity level that we need them to be for these roles. So yes, Samkelo, that's the two from my side. I don't know, Trace may have others. Thanks.
Thanks, Rashni. And I see our guest, Deborah, has also joined us. We just want to finish this discussion, and then we can start the other one, okay? And Tracy, do you have anything to say? Because I want to move over to learning and development. Are you fine, Tracy?
Thanks, Samkelo. The one thing that I just want to say, and this is my ignorance that I know that our audience will probably have better line of sight of, and if it doesn't exist, I think it's something that Bpesa should pick up to lobby to request. I don't know if there's a national database of individuals that are currently on learnerships, so that when organizations are recruiting, that they can actually just test that ID number against a national database to see if somebody is actively on a learnership at the moment, and then not go through the pains of activating. But it's my ignorance that I don't know if one exists or not. Like I say, if not, I think that's something that we should be picking up as Bpesa.
Yeah, that's a good idea. With something that we can follow up as we go ahead. One of the challenges that was mentioned is also, I'm curious to hear what are the challenges around learning and development. 20% of the people attending this call have indicated that learning and development is also a challenge for them in human resources. Anyone wants to give us an example, or what are some of the issues around learning and development? Is it competing the learning event? Or is it people not attending the learning? Is it the learning material? Share with us some of the insights. I don't want to pick up on you, Felicity. I know it's a learning issue. I don't want to pick up on you. Who wants to give us feedback? Those who chose learning. Petro, you are on the floor.
Yeah, Samkelo, the biggest issue that we have is, especially in the BPO environment, is to get the operations or the business to give us time with this call center agents to do the learning that we have on offer for them, because as you know, a lot of BPOs gets paid for their productivity time. So it seems like the development plans and career paths that we have available for people, it is an ongoing battle to get them off the phones to actually go through the learning and attend the learning. And we don't expect them to do this in their free time. So if there's anybody else who have solved this problem, I would be very curious to know, please.
So if I understand, once you've got the candidates, you are then given a particular time, but what you are presenting is that time might be 2 weeks or it might be 2 months. It's never enough to do the theory and the practice and to get them ready so that they can hit the ground running in the workplace. That's one challenge in learning and development. Last more, any other challenges for those of you who've chosen learning and development? Thank you very much, Petro. Any other people? Anyone else?
Hi, Samkelo, it's
Nita.
Nita.
Yes, hi, Sissy.
How are you?
I'm fine. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
sorry, I joined you after the poll, but what I wanted to say in relation to what Tracy said is that there is a database that we can go onto to check whether a learner is already registered on a learnership or hasn't been exited on a previous learnership. The problem is that when you're partnering with an employer who's doing their own recruitment, or you partnering with a recruitment agency, they will sometimes go through the entire recruitment process. And because the individual hasn't been transparent or honest upfront, they will go through the process, they'll do all the checks and balances, and they will present perhaps the learning provider with a candidate that they believe is capable of taking on the learnership. The problem is that at that point, when we as the provider go onto the platform and actually check their credentials, we realize that they are either have been on a learnership that has not been exited by their previous training provider, or they're on a learnership and they are still in it, so they can't be exited. The problem is that we've done the work before we even check, and that's because you're either going through the recruitment company or you're going through the recruitment division of a particular employer. So that's why it's a little bit sticky, as the previous person said.
No, thank you for that, and also just those details in terms of what are some of those challenges when it comes to learners. The last one I want to deal, I'm conscious of time. Under industrial relations, where 25% of you on this call, you indicated industrial relations as a challenge. We've done recruitment, people not coming to interviews, skills, and also we've now spoken about learning as well, where we're saying that there's not enough time for people to finish their learning. Under industrial relations, what are some of those challenges? Under IR, sometimes it's called employee relations. Who wants to share some of the challenges under in employee relations or industrial relations? Anyone else? Is there anyone who wants to share some of the challenges on industrial relations? Doesn't look like there's anyone, so I'm conscious of time, and we already thanks Mpumi for doing the poll and sharing the results. We will be having polls as we go along during this session, so please take a look at your screen. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Deborah from Enabling HR, my colleague who's in London. She runs her own consulting company. I don't want to steal your thunder, Sissy. Maybe just give us a brief intro about yourself, your background, and where are you located? Lovely background, by the way. And thank you very much for joining us in this Bpesa HR forum. Go ahead, Sissy.
Well, sorry, do you say Debbie?
Yeah.
Yes, just checking. I seem to have a stripe. The sun just came out in England, which is quite amazing. I'm in the southwest, near Bath, between Bristol and Bath, for those of you who've been over here. Nice countryside, and it was miserable just now, but the sun's come out. I went into HR from the bottom. I bet a lot, it was the same for you too, worked my way up. So did the admin role, did my CIPD qualification. I'm now a fellow, which I'm very proud of. And after I'd been in HR for about 10 years, I worked my way up to be head of HR for an IT company and then a pharmaceutical company. But it's a tough job, isn't it? I'm sure you'll agree. And I realized that the part of the job that I enjoyed most is the development part. So I actually decided to leave, set up my own business, and specialize in leadership and management development, which I did for 25 years. And I've worked with some great clients, some big global organizations and some local ones as well. And of course, during that time, my clients were often in HR. And so I've always kept in touch with HR. I've been to my CIPD meetings, been on the committee. So I've always been asking HR people, you know, what are you working on at the moment? And I began to realize actually that HR hadn't changed very much, which surprised me. And a lot of the issues that I'd had are the same issues that you guys have now. And so myself and a colleague, we decided to look into that and do some research. And so that's what brought me to where I am now.
Thank you very much, Debs. And unfortunately, most people here are from human resources. So I'm going to have to ask you just to give us a bit information about yourself. You know, we both in HR, me and you. There's that critical question we always ask during an interview. tell us about yourself. This is when we want to know more about the person than the qualification and the work experience. You did say something about Southwest London. You didn't say Ukraine, am I right? So tell us a bit about the person.
I do have a Ukrainian on my team, which is great. No,
Okay.
I'm in the southwest of England, so not London at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite a rural area, but Bristol's a big city and Bath is very historic. I'm sure you've seen Bath on the TV. If you've watched Bridgerton, for example, that's filmed in Bath, really historic city. So we have countryside around here. I used to live in the Midlands in a much more industrial area, but I'm a bit of a country girl now. Really like being in the countryside. Have my husband, we have 3 grown-up children and a dog.
Excellent, and thank you for sharing. When you say you are a country girl, Nita, will that be like rural for us here in South Africa? You also mentioned something around Bridgerton. I only remember Bridget Jones' Diary, so I'm not sure.
Well,
that. No, sorry.
Nah, it's on Netflix. It's on Netflix. I bet some of the ladies here will have watched it.
Okay, I'm not gonna say people that please lift up your hand if you've walked it. Now that you are consulting and working in human resources, what are you seeing? What's the picture? What's emerging? You spoke about the history where you've worked. In your experience, what's coming up in your lenses now in the human resources field?
Well, it really is a time for change, I think, and of opportunity, because I know that a lot of, obviously, everybody's struggling with people leaving at the moment, attrition. I heard somebody mention, people not turning up for interviews. It's a bit of a sort of a seller's market at the moment. Yet we're still got to be so careful about who we recruit. So I think that one issue gives us a really good platform in HR to justify the great value of looking after our talent. And something that's always been frustrating for me, because I care about people. And I think that in HR, most of us join because we're interested in people. We like people. We like being involved with people. We like helping people to do a better job, enjoy their work, get more out of life. And so when you find yourself in a really tough environment with business leaders who just don't seem sympathetic to people at all, then that can be so frustrating. And it makes you feel as if you're soft, and HR gets the reputation of being a soft function. And sometimes we kind of do that to ourselves, because I know I've been guilty of going into a meeting and representing a manager or an employee and describing a situation that to me just clearly isn't right. And yet actually what we need to do is make a business case. So the Great Resignation gives us the opportunity to provide hard data, to say, these people leaving is really disrupting our business. We can't get the skills. We can put a number on it as well. And I recently did some research around, the big 5, McKinsey and Deloitte and other thought leaders and data specialists. And really, if it's a professional person or a manager, you really are looking at 2 times salary. 200% of their salary is the cost. Because when you think about the onboarding, well, the recruitment costs, you can work that out easily. There's onboarding, training, and the fact that actually it takes some time for them actually to be productive. It really does take some time. And actually there's a great chart from Deloitte with this graph of saying, well, yes, you're here, but until this point here, you're not actually being productive. So when you work that out, it is a big number for one person. And then when you say to your senior leaders, say you've got a senior manager and they lost 10 people this year, then you can say, you know what, that is this number times 10. That's a lot of money. So often what we want to do in HR is invest. We want to invest in training our leaders and managers. We want to make sure that leaders will walk the talk. So when we're understanding these reasons for people leaving, and we have to accept that for some of them, you know, it's just the normal attrition times 2, because they couldn't really leave in 2020. So at the moment, I think this really is a big issue, and yet there's still the workload. So HR people are so busy. So having the time to think about the big issues like culture and leadership is quite difficult when you're actually just really running to keep still.
As we were preparing for this session in the meeting that we had, you also shared that you also provide coaching to men and women who work in human resources. Without naming the companies, would you share some of the themes that are coming up in your coaching conversations with men and women who work in HR? So what are some of the themes? What are some of the challenges you are hearing from them or from their organizations?
Yeah. Well, the coaching situation is quite often helping HR leaders, especially women, operate at board level, sometimes with a very difficult CEO. So in fact, the research that I just mentioned, I did for a coaching client, because she's saying her boss, actually in this situation, her boss totally gets culture, but his leadership team don't. So he's given her the job of making the case for building the culture that they need to take their function forward, take their organization forward. And she knows that those guys aren't going to get it. They're numbers people. And of course, we've got this sort of history, haven't we? And it's quite understandable that numbers people, and I am kind of creating 2 clear categories here, partly because numbers are not my thing. If you put a spreadsheet in front of me, I will have to look at it for about 20 minutes before I can work it out. I will get it. I will get it. But the point about numbers as well is that it's not all about spreadsheets. It's about really understanding your own organization so that you can use anecdotes. So thinking about this, this lady, she's had the stories from people who've left from the exit interviews. You know, somebody who gave a great example that they'd only been with there 9 months. So imagine they've been in the job 9 months. So it's a really unfortunate time to lose someone. And the reason they gave for leaving was that there isn't enough trust. And the illustration they gave of that was that anything they did had to be signed off by 5 different people. So they really felt they weren't trusted. So you can get anecdotal examples like that to illustrate the value of culture. So that definitely is one thread. And sometimes it is actually to cope with their own boss, the CEO, because they're, a couple of them actually been bullied, to be honest. So often it is about operating at that level, getting used to being part of a leadership team and working on their own leadership, of course.
Okay. I'm curious to unpack the one about bullying, but I won't do that. Earlier on, you mentioned that you are in the southwest part of London. You did mention that you are a country girl, you have a dog. So I would imagine now and again you go on walks with this dog in the fields or wherever, which is great. I also happen to know that you also wrote a book. Can you please tell us, besides walking that dog, picking up leaves and all of that, tell us the title of that book and why did you write that book? And please give us a summary of that book. And then I'm going to open up to the audience if they've got any questions for you. So just to go back again, you do walk the dog in the rural area. Great, well done on that. But you also wrote a book. I'm not sure where you find the tab. What's the title of the book? Why did you write the book? And what are the themes in the book? Yeah.
Of course, does that look backwards? Empowering HR. And that really is the essence of the book. And the time thing, I actually wrote it during the first lockdown. And once I got started, actually, I got it done quite quickly. It's a bit of a labor of love because I really do have a mission to help HR people. This is the thing that I want to leave with the world, which sounds a bit odd. But the thing is, with HR, you have the opportunity to improve lives. There's the person in front of you, their colleagues, their team, their families, their communities. The world of work affects everybody. And we have the opportunity to create a better world of work. And that is the privilege that we have in HR. But we can't achieve progress in that unless we have credibility and influence. And so the book kind of pulls together the work that I've done in leadership development for 25 years with people of all functions, and also the research that we did into what is it that makes HR work. And also, I have to say, some of it is looking at why does HR get criticized so much? What is it that HR need to do to get the credit, to get the respect? And then, of course, if you have that, then you can really get results and have a positive impact. And there was one key thread coming through all the research that really emerged really strongly, and that is the quality of the relationship between HR and the business.
Wow. Excellent. No, thank you very much for that. I just want to delve a little bit before I give people in the call just to answer their questions. You've used words that your other brother who's in the US, Dave Ulrich, also has used. You've used the word credible and also influence as well. So he would use the word credible. HR must be a credible activist. That's the word he would use. Can you just please unpack that? If I'm in South Africa working in human resources, when I'm credible and doing influence, how does that show itself practical in my day-to-day, in a BPO, shared services, or even in my consulting company? When I'm credible, when I'm doing influence in HR, what am I doing practically? Just want to unpack that for us, please.
Yeah. So I think in HR, it's a bit of a journey, because the first stage of building credibility is probably in the quality of the advice that you give. And I'm sure everybody in this room gets listened to when they give advice. The next level of credibility really is as a leader of the business. I'm a business leader and I happen to be HR is a great motto, because then you will be involved in the business discussion. So say, I think what a lot of us tend to do, and this would include me, you know, if I could rewind and have my career again, there is so much that I would do differently. But say, for example, you're in a meeting and the HR is at the end of the agenda and you wait until the end of the meeting to say anything, then clearly we don't build our credibility as business leaders. But if we make sure that we're prepared to join in the discussion, whether it's about what's happening in IT, in sales, in customer service, if we know what's going on in those functions as well, then that builds our credibility as people who really understand the organization, especially if you can contribute. And we do pick up loads of stories as we go around the organization, and dropping those in at the right moment can be so credible. Like one of the best things I ever did was spend a day with a sales rep in the pharmaceutical business. And so that meant that I was in a meeting. I really knew what happened in that critical interaction between the sales rep and the doctor, so that I could say, I could disagree with people when they say, yeah, but we really need our sales reps to really push for the sale. And I was able to say, actually, what I saw was that in our business, the sales reps really need to protect the relationship. So we could really get into a discussion about that. So spending time, whatever the front line is of your business, if you can spend time there, it pays dividends.
Thank you very much, Deborah. And I want to open this up over to anyone in the audience if they've got any questions for you. or things that they want clarity or to discuss with you. As Samantha said earlier on, just raise your hand if you would like to ask Deborah any questions. Anyone from the audience, please?
Samkelo, it's Tracy. Sorry, I can't raise my hand. So just while everyone's thinking. Deborah, I just put a question in the chat group at the moment. I don't know if you have a view on or an opinion on what I think might happen in the future, but I'm waiting to see. There's a pending global recession that everybody's starting to speak about, and it's a direct, well, debatable, but directly off of the back of what happened with lockdown and what the global economy is now experiencing. At the moment, specifically for the UK and the US, there is the Great Skills Challenge, and you kind of opened up with that, and we know what's happening there. That, from a South African perspective, is an advantage for us. It's part of the reason why we're seeing so much interest in our country and with organizations looking for alternate geographies and to set up somewhere where there is an abundance of skill, which is what South Africa has, and we have fantastic skill as well. Great. My question is, when the recession happens, because I think we all agree that it is going to happen at some point in the near future, do you foresee that skill shortage in the UK and the US is going to dissipate as individuals? It's no longer the employees market, it's now the employers market. Do you foresee that happening?
Well, personally, I think that the balance has shifted forever. If what you've got, because of course businesses vary, don't they? So we've got some businesses that are high skilled and they know that their talent can walk easily. And there are other businesses where maybe they're less skilled and you can treat them more like a commodity. But generally, for me, that term sums up the shift that here in the UK, we have tended to treat people like a commodity. Well, if you upset that one, it doesn't matter, they can leave and you can get another one in. And that really changed because I suppose the volume of people leaving has really had an impact on businesses' ability to operate. And therefore, senior leaders are realizing that they have to work to make people stay because it's a lot cheaper than having to recruit them. So I think there's a lot of work going on in stabilizing organizations and building cultures that people want to be a part of. So I think also we've got the demographic thing going on. We've also got the work from home. So that means, well, the way it's playing out here is it really doesn't matter where you live anymore. There are a lot of people who are leaving jobs because they're thinking, I actually want to work at home all the time. So if my company is trying to say to me, you must come back to the office, I'm just saying no. And if they are marketable enough, they can say no. They're just looking for a job where the contract is, it's fully remote. So that is still settling down as well. But I think this attitude of people that they're not going to be treated like commodities, I think that's here to stay, and it's reinforced by the attitude of our young people anyway. I don't know if that's the same in South Africa, but certainly here, they expect to be paid well. They expect to be given a lot of responsibility quickly. They expect to be given great tech to do their jobs with. And so obviously not every organization is going to cooperate with that. So that's where you get the natural leveling out of, you know, the talent. If they're really talented and can prove it, they're going to be given those things. So I think it will level out, but I don't think the pendulum will swing back in terms of the power of the employer in this country.
Thanks, Tracy. That was a very good question. And just thank you for doing that comparison and also to sharing, Deb, on your side and then what's happening in the UK and what the employee is looking for. Of the word commodity. Before we wrap up, are there any other questions from the audience, our human resources friend? Anyone who's got a question for Deborah? Just raise your hand. Petro, you can go ahead, Sissy. That has to be our last question before we move on to the next one. Go ahead, Sissy.
Hi, Deborah. Yes, something that we're struggling with. We took our service delivery to the business so seriously that we started with changing our naming convention, that we have dropped human resources, because in some areas there's such a negative connotation to it, that they're the ones that write the policies and they assist line managers with the discipline. And so we changed our naming convention to be people focused, so people experience, people engagement, people development. And we're looking at our JDs as well to make it very people focused, and how we can help our people to a level where they experience their delivering the best work ever. So having said all that, what really gets to me, and I think with your wealth of leadership development, maybe there's a quick answer to it, is even with all that support that we're doing and the focus on getting the best of our people, what really is a struggle when you find that frontline leadership, like our team captains and team leader level that directly is responsible for the call center agent, is that they don't take ownership. So in having the difficult conversations, that they'll often say, no, but HR said this and this and this, and HR said, so it really affects our brand and our relationship with the people. Is there any sort of, I don't want to say quick fix, but is there any sort of advice to overcome that ongoing challenge?
I think that's a really central challenge for HR, isn't it? Getting leaders to lead and managers to manage. And if they did, our jobs would be a lot easier. We actually had a tribunal case in the UK that was really interesting, where because the line manager said, I just did what HR told me to do, they lost the tribunal, because the tribunal was saying you've got to actually get line managers and leaders to own this. And so HR got hit both ways. So just, you know, it's a really talked about case here, because they've got to really take it on board, haven't they? And often this starts at the top, doesn't it? So we have to get leaders to walk the talk and get it really into the culture, because sometimes you can have it as a value that you're people focused or caring or whatever. It's a poster on the wall, and yet you hear stories all the time of managers being really unsympathetic, not giving time for managers. Personally, I think a great tool is an employee survey, an engagement survey. One that is carefully put together so that you ask questions that really make sense to your audience. Something that I've done in the past is something we call scoping interviews, where we actually really find out what's going on in that organization and use their language. And then you can make the links. So if you get evidence that people are, their experience of their line manager is poor, and they don't get listened to, they don't get feedback, they don't get advice or coaching. When you get that feedback, you can then draw a direct line, like a join the dots kind of thing, you know, because they're not getting that, then that's why we're losing people. That's why we don't have the productivity we should have. So I think that's one way of getting their attention, and doing exit interviews, getting the data, asking them open questions, not just filling in a form, confidential exit interviews. I think data now is a big word. So whatever you call data, actually getting the evidence to back you up, because one of the things I find is that for us in HR, it's completely obvious. Some things are completely obvious, like if you develop people, they'll perform better. If you listen to people, you'll find out what help they need. If you respect people, they will show more respect for what the company wants them to do. There are certain human things that to us are so obvious they shouldn't need stating. But what I found is that actually we do need to state the obvious and explain why it matters to business. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes, for sure. Thank you very much so.
Deborah, you've been a star, and I like the way that you've been practical. So we're just going to ask you just one word of wisdom. If we were working with you with that dog in the park or wherever, just your parting word of what advice would you give to us sitting in this call, having this conversation with you on human resources? And it's hard just to give one word because you're so full of wisdom and so full of experiences. So that parting shot, that encouraging, that affirmation to those of us each day who come to work for human resources. We either do recruitment, we do learning, performance management, we get bullied, we get blamed, people don't come to interviews. What is that one word of affirmation and advice you would give to us?
I think it's about being courageous, pushing forward and pushing back. When we did our research, and we've got a framework of 7 enablers, and if any of you would like to have a complimentary version of our profile, let me know. But one of them is called push. And it came through so strongly, this feeling that organizations want HR to speak up, stand up, push back, and we don't tend to be very good at that. So that's the one thing. I think now is the time for HR to be more courageous than ever before. We've got a great platform, and organizations do need us. We've got to be more business-like and use numbers, speak their language, not HR. So push forward, speak their language, really push yourself into that room where the decisions are being made.
Wow, that's great. And I like the use of the word being courageous. On that note, thank you very much, and just sharing your wisdom. And I'm fully aware that in UK, you've also lost Her Majesty the Queen. May her soul rest in peace. As a Xhosa boy in the Eastern Cape, we call this period a season of mourning. I've only got one request to ask you during this season, now that Her Majesty has passed away. If you happen to drive next to Westminster, speak to Kate or William, please find out if my name is mentioned in any will, and if I may get any pound coming down to Samkelo. They already have a family that is inclusive in Megan and Archie. So maybe in the will at Westminster, there is a name called Samkelo Blom. Just please share those funds over down to me, and then I'll share with the rest of the HR team. Deborah, thank you very much. You've been a star, and thank you very much, ma'am, for your time.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's always great to talk with HR people. I hope you have a great conference today.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on, colleagues. The next item on our agenda is inclusive hiring and impact sourcing. And I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to give over to you, Tracy Freeman. And CCC.
Thank you, Samkelo. Hi, everyone. I hope everybody is well. I'm going to do a quick spot poll, but it's just you putting your hands up. Who knows what impact sourcing is, or who thinks that they know what impact sourcing is? We can just put some hands up and we see how many hands pop up.
We have Nita.
Yeah, I've got a few coming up here. That's 5. Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to put a quick presentation up just to share 1 or 2 things. So the reason for actually asking that question is really just to, it was quite interesting. We attended a forum in Vegas 2 weeks ago where there were a number of BPO operators that were engaging and just really sort of unpacking pain points, etc. And then there was a buyers panel, which was quite fascinating, actually. So from a buyer's perspective, what are they looking for? What works for them when it comes to partnering with a BPO service provider organization? And there was just a lot that came up. So, of course, we had to ask the question of the buyers panel, how important is impact sourcing to you? I'm almost embarrassed to say that not one of the 4 buyers that were sitting on the stage actually knew what impact sourcing was. when we gave a definition and unpacked it, they all had an element of saying, oh, no, that's something that's of value to us. One that didn't know anything about it said, no, that would be a great selling point. But it just really was an awakening for me anyway, sitting with this assumption that everybody knows what impact sourcing is and that it sort of sits at the core of who they are and what they do. So the reason that we wanted to just unpack a little bit what impact sourcing is, what inclusive hiring is from a South African perspective is multifold actually. So for us as South Africa, as a destination that is pitching and selling ourselves to a global community, we know that one of the key reasons why we focus in on impact sourcing and inclusive hiring, and I'm going to give you the very specific definitions because they're slightly nuanced, but why that's important for us is because we live with a reality of an embarrassing 69% youth unemployment in the country. Which makes the previous conversation really interesting because I know we sit there a little bit baffled going, well, if we've got such high unemployment, why are some of the challenges that were raised earlier on coming to the fore? And that is a slightly different conversation and maybe one that we kind of want to pick up, Samkelo. And I know that you've referenced before, it comes around confidence and the confidence to know that you're going to be successful going for interviews and that type of thing. So what do we as a society maybe have to do to start mitigating that? But we know that from a global business services perspective, with this abundance of amazing talent, this warmth, this empathy that we know our people, ourselves as a community, as a country have, that the global business services sector is a great sector to bring many of these unemployed youth into. We always speak about the pyramid of skills and potential talent. And again, you're at the coalface of this, but some of those individuals are easy to pick up off the top of the pyramid and plug and play into an environment. Some need a little bit more work. They can come in, you can engage with them, and quite quickly they get up and running. And others, that's where a lot of our national skills initiatives are sort of focused, and our schooling and education system to kind of get them a little bit more work ready. But from an impact sourcing perspective, just very quickly for those that aren't aware, I'm always very proud of the fact that impact sourcing, although it has been globally practiced in many emerging markets, many markets where there is a high unemployment rate of some form or the other, it doesn't necessarily have to be youth, that South Africa is actually the recognized center of excellence when it comes to impact sourcing. We ran a project globally a number of years ago, and South Africa was one of the countries that was working with the global philanthropic organization, Rockefeller Foundation. And they're really sort of testing out, how do we get marginalized, unemployed youth into the digital world of work? And of course, that's where global business services, the BPO, the call center sector in South Africa all put up our hands and said, we want to play in this space. We're looking for skills. How do we get involved? And what was really interesting is that while they were playing out the framework of how this employment of digitally enabled skills could get into the world of work, they kept coming up against what we know locally very, very well, the BEE scorecard, and trying to understand what that meant. And when we unpacked it for them and explained that really it's just a procurement process that has a domino effect from buyer to provider, that is what they actually adopted as the impact sourcing model. So I'm just going to hop onto, actually, I've done this badly because I almost want to hop onto my last slide. I'm just, before I go back into the impact sourcing piece and just explain how it all works there, this research is going to be presented in October. It's our new value proposition, or our updated value proposition. But one of the things that we're quite excited about is that there actually is a global research piece that's done. There's a benchmark that looks at empathy. And for all of you who know how we pitch and sell South Africa to the global community, one of the big areas that we always focus in on is our high levels of empathy that we as a people have. And I know when we speak into the UK or the US market, one of the things that they often ask about is their cultural alignment. So we do know that South Africans are resilient. We saw how we managed COVID. And just because, and this being a local call, I always want to use the term a boer maak 'n plan, but this is what we do as South Africans. We just get up and we get on with it. That is not always the natural response and reaction from global individuals and organizations, but it's something that we as South Africans do. And it's just really who we are as a people, and, you know, maybe from a historic past that we have, that we just need to be able to move forward. And we do that with a natural level of empathy. And again, it's not something a couple of years ago or a decade ago that we really sort of honed in on, because it's just, as I say, what we do. But this is something that our clients definitely have said that they appreciate and enjoy about working with South Africa and South Africans. So I just wanted to let you know about that. It's another little feather in our cap there. When we come to impact sourcing, sorry, going back to it, when the impact sourcing initiative was launched, the definition for impact sourcing is intentional recruitment of marginalized communities with a view of creating a career for the individuals. So many countries practice impact sourcing, but it'll look slightly different to what South Africa does, or it has a different community that it engages with. So impact sourcing is not only for marginalized youth. In South Africa, that is exactly what it is. We know that we have a marginalized community, and it is our Black broad youth population. In Europe, for example, their marginalized community would be refugees. For the US, there's a lot of impact sourcing that actually goes on there. And one of the areas that I always pick on, because we didn't, at the time, it was quite a novelty for me, but spouses of military personnel often are not recruited because the employers know that they're going to be leaving in 18 months to 2 years because of the way military staff are moved around the country. So that would be a marginalized community within the US. So it really depends on where you're recruiting to what that marginalized community would look like. We, however, from a South African perspective, have a lot of experience in the space of impact sourcing. We have success stories that we've actually won, and I'm not sure if Web helps on the call, but I always want to give them a shout out because they won the 2022 Impact Sourcing Award, just with how they've really embraced impact sourcing. They've put it into their standard recruitment processes, their training processes. Some of their clients only work with impact workers, individuals that have come in and weren't coming through from being employed into the new position. And they've seen massive successes. They really, really are doing well with it. They have a goal to actually do 30% globally impact sourcing across all of their operations, which I think is a fantastic goal to have set for themselves. And of course, it just ties in nicely with what they're doing in South Africa. But we do know that although there are some strains and pains and some additional costs that we may have to incur when we first employ somebody from an impact sourcing perspective, that within 6 months, we find that that individual is on par with a standard recruit, if not doing better. And a lot of that comes down to obviously how we recruit, how we engage, how we train, and literally how we handhold and nurture that individual to the point of being a productive staff member. And there we actually see that the attrition rates reduce because there's a loyalty factor that this individual is just really grateful that they got given an opportunity with you as an organization, that you value them, that you've actually invested in them, and that they're able to, support their family and their community. I've already covered some of this, but just we are a center of excellence, and we are often actually showing how it is that we as South Africa partner. And this is what I think is important for all of our organizations on the call. In order for this to work and for it to be successful, as much as what we as BPOs may go and pitch ourselves as a true and meaningful partner to our global client base servicing global customers, equally so when we have an impact sourcing community, we need to make sure that the training provider, the recruitment provider, the BPO as the employer are working in true and meaningful partnership, open and honestly, to really try and make sure that when we do bring these individuals into the world of work and into our organizations, that we build them up for success. And I'm sure that you all have some brilliant examples of what you're doing and how you're doing that. And just on that, I didn't want to grab the mic again with Deborah, but with her response to my question that I had about what is going to happen going forward, are we going to see that South Africa loses that edge and that opportunity of being skills rich and able to scale from a skills perspective? Her response was not necessarily, but that organizations need to make sure that they are truly looking after their staff and making sure that the staff want to stay. I know we do that as organizations in South Africa. I want us to caution ourselves of falling into the trap of turning staff into commodities. And because we are pitching ourselves to the global community as having an abundance of skill and talent, I want to make sure that we are not pushed by the global community of suddenly engaging with our skills as commodities. So that's almost sort of just a cautionary call out. Just some more statistics on what we're doing from a global impact sourcing perspective, from an impact sourcing perspective, but just how we are viewed in the global space with our savings that come in, mostly because of obviously labor arbitrage, our exchange rate, the incentives that we have as a country to support the global community coming into South Africa. But impact sourcing itself adds to the savings that will be experienced by organizations when they actually outsource to our BPOs, or if BPOs set up in South Africa. So this is really the slide that we wanted to just unpack. I'm not sure how many of you on the call are the individual who gives monthly stats and quarterly stats to our research partner when we want to know how many jobs have you created this past month, this past quarter. If you are that individual and you are consistently giving the numbers, I want to just say thank you very much. If you're not that individual, I would encourage you please to find out who within your organization is that central contact point that we engage via our research partners, and then those who are incentive recipients would engage directly with the DTIC to give your quarterly statistics on who are you employing, what are their demographics, age groups, are there an impact worker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Reason that is so important for those of you that are not aware, so the global business services sector has been identified as a priority sector in South Africa by the DTIC, by government. That is exceptionally important. And again, I'm proud of the fact that we're one of 6 industries that has been identified as a priority sector in the country. It means that we have the support of government, both in kind and then to continue giving of the financial support with the incentives. But it just shows how they see us as an industry that is going to support the growth, the economic growth of the country, but then equally so, as we know, really try and tap into that opportunity to create youth jobs for our massive unemployed youth contingent. So when we speak about impact sourcing, which a couple of you put up your hands and said, yes, we do know that this is intentional recruitment of marginalized individuals, bringing them into the world of work and setting them up for a life of employment and for a career. However, there's another term which you may or may not have heard of, and that is called inclusive hiring. Now, inclusive hiring is actually a subset of impact sourcing. It's very specific to South Africa. And again, a pride point that I often raise when speaking to international organizations. We are currently the only country, the only government that has embedded inclusive hiring as a subset, intentional recruitment of individuals, marginalized individuals, into the world of work or into our BPOs, where they've embedded that into the incentives that they actually give out to international organizations servicing a client base, a customer base from South Africa. Now, inclusive hiring has some specific T's and C's, and anyone who is an incentives applicant, and actually very important for training and HR to know, because often it is signed at sort of the business development level or the exec level. And next thing, and I know Reshni will attest to this, there's been issues when we go and do the quarterly reporting where the individuals that have been recruited in have been standard recruits. We're currently employed, they've either been, they've come through from other organizations, but they've had experience. They were not actually an inclusive hire. And that means that the 20%, which is the number that has to be achieved, of individuals being brought into the organization are not going to qualify, which means that the organization may not get the incentives. So in order to qualify the 20% inclusive hires, the individual, and sorry, I just realized actually there's, this is cut off. There's 2 more points that needed to pop under the quintile 1, 2, 3 score. But to qualify an impact source hire, there's a couple of things. Number one, as we know, they need to be a South African citizen. They need to come from a marginalized environment where the household earns no more than 6,000 Rand a month. And I always say, sadly, that is not difficult to achieve. So that needs to be one of the tick boxes. And you only need to tick one of these boxes that I'm going to mention, not all 3. So they need to come from a household that is earning 6,000 Rand or less per month. They need to have been unemployed for the last 6 months. That is important. And they need to have come from, and it's an and or, they need to have come from a quintile 1, 2, 3 school. So one of those boxes needs to be ticked in order to justify them being an inclusive hire. Where you can see the difference with impact sourcing, the individual may come from a marginalized community, but they may have gone to a quintile 4 school, or they may have their household earning more than 6,000 Rand a month. So you can see where there's slight nuances, and not saying it's one or the other. It's just when you're practicing, when you're aiming towards achieving the 20% for the incentives, they need to have been inclusively hired. At the moment, it's 20%. We are looking as an industry, as a country, to actually increase that number at the next iteration of the incentives, which are not due for another sort of 2 years or so. But just to keep you aware of that. And it's really when you are engaging with individuals, bringing them in, making sure that you're asking some of the relevant questions to make sure that they qualify from that perspective. If you're not looking to apply for the incentives, I think it's still something of interest for you to know who you're bringing into your environment and your organization. And then to be able to tick the impact sourcing box, or specifically if you need to the inclusive hiring box. Samkelo, last thing that I just want to sort of make reference of, specifically when speaking about the international community. I started off by saying that we are a resilient nation. We kind of just get on with it. We do what we have to do. But often we don't realize what we're doing, how well it is regarded or appreciated by the global community. And in this case, by our customer base and our client base. Globally, there is a big push on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's DEI. And again, I was exposed to a new term the other day, and it was DEIB. And I sat there going, what's the B? And there's me sitting Googling going, what's the B on the DEI? And it's actually quite beautiful. And I know that this is something that you as an HR community, as a people community, and I know that Samkelo often reminds us, actually, the B is belonging. So it's really about when the individual comes into the environment, yes, they may be able to tick the box of being diverse, of the organization now ensuring that there's equity and inclusion. But that inclusion, what does it actually mean? What does it look like until you allow the individual to belong? And that really brings the human aspect back into ticking a box of DEIB. So I'm, again, really thrilled that from a South African perspective, we do that well. But when it comes to global companies, and many of them have DEI as a sort of a board pack agenda item that they need to sort of fulfill, and they're not too sure how to do that. South Africa, again, with our history, with how we have really created methodologies and frameworks to ensure that we are being more transformative, that we are making sure that there's equity and inclusion within our environments. This is kind of a day in the life of, this is what we do as a standard. So there's a standard practice rather. There's a lot that our international community can learn from us, and they've said as much. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we do that really, really well from a South African perspective. And we happen to have given the two labels, impact sourcing and inclusive hiring. So if there are any questions, please feel free to pop up your hands. But yeah, I hope that clarifies the two definitions.
Tracy, you spoke about impact sourcing and inclusive hiring. What would you like us to do practically going forward as members of Bpesa sitting on this call? What are the practical actions that you want us to implement, either in impact sourcing or inclusive hiring?
So, Samkelo, the big thing that we need to do as an industry is we cannot change, you all know this, you cannot change what you don't measure. And that's why we have our staff on SLAs, and that's why we've got our wall boards and everyone's seeing how they're doing on a daily basis. We need to make sure that as an industry, we are constantly reporting in, and Bpesa is the central point there, reporting in from how we're hiring, who we're hiring, what our numbers and percentages are, etc. We cannot improve, we cannot claim that we're achieving what we're aiming to achieve as an industry if we're not actually measuring it. So my biggest call out is, please make sure that you are reporting your numbers on a quarterly basis. We do not tag the numbers to you as a brand or you as an organization. We put it in as a collective, and on the Bpesa website, we have our quarterly job reports, and that comes from you, but we can only report what you give us. So that's the one thing I want to make a call out. The second thing is, be very proud of the fact that we are a center of excellence when it comes to practicing impact sourcing. And then, as we say, even one step ahead, inclusive hiring. And let's share best practices. Let's learn from one another. There's ways that there's certain frustrations that could be experienced, but there's ways and means of actually mitigating those frustrations by sharing and learning from one another. And this is really what the forum and opportunity is about.
Yeah, my sister Leanne had a question. Leanne could say a question. international and global clients, they want agents with experience. How do we position impact sourcing with them?
Yeah, Leanne, it's always such a brilliant question. And I mean, we know that as a community, we were doing that as well. It comes down to education, because some of the engagements, fair enough, there may be a need or certain knowledge that the consultants need to have in order to effectively support the client and their customers. However, often they say that as a standard, there's no reason why the individual has to have previously worked in a contact center or call center. Experience comes in many different ways, means, and forms. And I think we've proven this fact many, many times, the resilience of our individuals. And I think Shona's going to be covering something now when it comes to, you know, what we're looking for from a recruitment perspective. But we all know we claim we hire for attitude and train for aptitude, or have the aptitude to be able to train them. And once we've got the individual in, there may be a lag time, and maybe it's just how we change how we put the individual on the phones or into those customer interactions. We don't sort of just dump them in and expect them to start running, because even somebody who's had experience cannot just start running with a new client campaign. There's a certain amount of engagement and training that's required. But it's really actually just pausing the client and going, why? Why? Because we've got case studies of bringing brand new individuals into the world of work, into servicing international campaigns. And obviously, so long as you know the language works and they're able to articulate appropriately, the rest of it we can build, and actually build really, really well. So there's no quick answer there, but I think to me, it's one of those times where we've actually got to question our client and go, just pause for a second, and why? And we've got some case studies of why that's possibly not necessary.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tracy. And that leads us nicely to what you've mentioned, to make a segue or to pivot. Tracy, these are words I've learned now that I spend more time on online, words like pivot and segue. With my Xhosa background, I would have just said, let's move on. Nita, you've got your hand up.
So thanks, Samkelo. Yeah. So yeah, Tracy, earlier you said that obviously you're looking for people to share stats with you guys as to what it is that they're doing. So my question is, what if we as learning solutions organizations are dealing with employers who are not members of Bpesa, but who are doing inclusive hiring and are doing either work readiness programs or learnerships and are actually employing people thereafter? What happens to those stats, and how do those stats get incorporated into Bpesa stats if they are not members of Bpesa?
Great question, Nita. Thank you so much. So firstly, let's get them on board and involved. Bpesa, and I'm not sure actually if everybody on the call is a Bpesa member or not, but Bpesa, being the organization that we really are a community. We're led and guided by our members for our members. So we obviously encourage for everybody to get involved. So my first call out will be, Nita, please introduce us to them so we can go and chat to them and understand why they're not, do they not know about us, or maybe they don't realize the value that they potentially could gain from being a member. Second quick answer is that the reporting is for members and non-members. So some of those numbers are non-member numbers, but we obviously can't engage with them if we don't know who they are. So my biggest call out is please introduce us, and we want to get them more involved and more on board.
Okay, excellent.
Cool. I think a lot of them are not internationals, they're domestic. So that's what we need to do, is actually speak to those guys. Cool.
And I think it's just a last little thing there. Thanks, Nita. Samkelo, with your blessing, just the reminder that Bpesa works with local, domestic, captive, and international BPOs. And the value that can be extracted from being part of this community is not only for international BPOs. Yes, we know as a country we are going to grow our employment opportunities by engaging with the global community. That's where the big growth is going to come from. But there's still a lot of value to be garnered from Bpesa for the local, captive, and the domestic BPO community.
Excellent. Thanks, Nita. That was a very good question. And just go back to my point, Tracy, it's a good time to do segue and pivot over to Shona, who's going to come and share with us around leadership development programs, what has been done, and where are we going in terms of developing leaders across this industry and sector. So over to you, Louise.
Thank you, Samkelo. So for those of you that don't know, the cat's out the bag, and Samkelo told you what my second name is, and that's Louise. But yeah, it's been an interesting conversation thus far. I think what's important to note is that a community of HR professionals, the more we bring up these frustrations, the more we talk about the problems, the sooner we are to finding solutions to that. And I think in terms of building our talent for the future, that is how we're going to overcome some of these challenges. I know that when internationals want to have somebody with experience, what Bpesa is doing from a future skills platform and what Harambee is doing from engaging youth and putting learning programs onto the SA Youth portal, and that's future state for them. But all this will just help get our talent up to a level where, regardless of whether they are quintile 1, 2, and 3, they'll be able to stack up against the best. And I think it was Petro that mentioned in the chat, so if you haven't seen that, she's saying that her impact source hires are outperforming the non-impact sourcing hires. So I think that's a really great call out to that. But when we look at how the sector is growing and when we look at the growth targets that we've got for the sector, they're huge. And unless we start building our talent now, for the future, we will find ourselves in even hotter water as we approach the near future, because 2030 isn't that far away. I think to kick it off, Pumi, won't you run the poll in terms of what assistance do you need? So that we can just get everybody's input from an HR perspective. What assistance do you need? And this will inform how we obviously move forward with our HR forums and what content we bring you as part of that. I think while everybody is voting, it was nice to see the issues of absenteeism and recruitment hasn't gone away. Having come from ops, it's something that you deal with on a daily basis. But that is solved through strong leadership. And I think somebody mentioned people not pitching up for interviews. What I found in my experience as an ops manager was generally recruiters will dictate the time that an agent needs to come through for an interview. And when I saw it happening with my people in ops a couple of years ago, they would come to me 2 days before the interview and go, Shona, I need leave or I need to take off lunch. But because the interview is on the other side of the city, they've got to take off the whole day because it's 3 taxis there. And now they're applying for emergency leave. And if I don't give it to them, they're going to be absent and they're going to get into trouble for doing that. And if I do give it to them, I am sometimes putting myself at risk for missing a service level, etc., etc. So what we found worked for us was to give the agent an opportunity to select the time slot that they wanted to be interviewed in. This way they could arrange the leave, they could let me know when they wanted it. And I know it's not always easy. Call center recruitment needs to happen yesterday. The ops manager has 10 vacancies. They tell you yesterday and they want people to start on Monday. So I get it. There are time constraints, but maybe what we need to do is look at different ways in which we make it a little bit more accessible for the agent to attend and not push up absenteeism rates in the organizations that they're leaving from. Mpumi, do we have our poll up?
Yes, we do. I'm just waiting for 2 minutes and then I'm going to share the results.
Okay, cool. Tracy, Nita wanted to know, are we measuring disabled youth absorption from an impact sourcing perspective as well? Maybe while we wait for the poll.
Yeah, great question. So, and I mean, Nita, actually, thank you for raising that, because I know that you've always been very focused for a number of years now on really bringing differently abled individuals into the BPO sector. And obviously it comes with a lot of benefits and certain challenges which organizations need to learn how to overcome, which I'm sure you could share. There are specific questions around differently abled. And obviously there's a whole spectrum of that, sort of visually obvious would be sight impaired or needing a wheelchair, but there's a lot of other disabilities that can also be measured, which some individuals don't always want to put forward. But that's the long answer. Quick answer is yes. Whether we're getting the full numbers or not, that I'm not sure.
Cool. Thanks so much, Trace. And the poll is in, and it looks like an HR portal with Q&A and information sharing, as well as networking assistance is top of the list. So what we'll do is in Samkelo's Q&A and open session at the end, maybe Samkelo, you can just touch on a couple of these things in terms of what specifically around networking assistance, because information sharing, fantastic. And then general HR support, upskilling myself in HR. So maybe something that we need to discuss with the future skills platform guys also is HR one of the paths that have been built into that, and how can our current HR network benefit from that. And then obviously training in this poll again, as well as the first one. So with that, Bpesa has embarked on several discussions around leadership boot camps and looking to fund pilots, etc., etc. And while we're still doing that, there has been a successful pilot that's been run in the Western Cape. And they have offered it to us, to all of our members at a cost. And this is something that will really build your team leader network up to that next level, to give them the competence that they need from a middle management perspective. And for today, what I really want to do is just take you all through the actual document or through the leadership program. This is just one of the leadership programs that Bpesa is looking at to introduce to the network and to our members. We're obviously engaged with other providers as well, and looking for how do we fast track leadership. With the growth of the sector happening, we also understand that strong leadership will help things like absenteeism, will help things like attrition, because when you're working for a leader who understands you, and then there's a quote that says, I don't leave an organization, I leave a leader. So how do we build that leadership level up to be able to combat some of these problems that we're experiencing in the HR field? And somebody mentioned it so nicely earlier that the return on investment when you're hiring somebody into a leadership role or into a middle management role or even senior management, and if that person leaves, the cost of replacing them just becomes exorbitant every single time. So when you start building people from internally within the organization, their propensity to stay becomes higher. And their propensity to get other people to stay at an agent level also then exists. And it's a knock-on effect in terms of benefit. So without further ado, let me jump straight into the Leadership Bootcamp. And I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. But really, the Leadership Bootcamp focuses on two distinct aspects of middle management and senior management, and that program partners with two professionals in the field in terms of each of the aspects. Tula, on the one hand, provides consulting services and training in the areas of ops management for the BPO sector specifically. And Tula is the only on-track accredited consultancy in sub-Saharan Africa. On-track themselves are a globally recognized training and consulting organizations created by professionals within the industry. On the other hand, we have Stand. They're a boutique people development consultancy which focuses on integrating the two most important assets in an organization. That is the organizational brand and the people. And the result is pulling together a brand-specific leadership development program that they've created. When we look at the management segment overview, it's important to understand that the three pillars that they focus on, or how the management segment gets done, is through a 1-week instructor-led program. Then there's an 8-week practical implementation, and we'll go through the details of it. And then a presentation to a panel of senior management on what they've improved on for the business. If we look at phase 1, just in terms of what's covered, it accounts for 50% of the accreditation and provides an overview of BPO, what BPO is all about, the type of BPO services that exist, the functions within a BPO, and the various operational roles and possible career paths. So it includes workforce management, quality assurance, IT. Then they look at performance management and covering various performance analysis tools available, including statistical tools. So looking at your standard deviation, etc. Analytical tools that the guys can use in their role, and root cause analysis tools. Then it also, if you look at there, one of the blocks is absenteeism, and it covers the definition of absenteeism, how it's measured, understanding why, and also showing team leaders and managers how it can be controlled. The topic of attrition is also discussed, just to help team leaders understand the nature of attrition, how it can be measured, what drives attrition, and how to manage it effectively. So attrition And absenteeism no longer then sits in the HRBP's sphere, but now your team leaders become equipped to assist and to help you drive those numbers down, so that you can showcase the value of the work that you're putting out there. Because you go through a lot to get the right people on board, and then they leave or they get dismissed because they haven't been attending work. There's also an element of understanding financial impact, and this demonstrates how metrics are ultimately linked to costs and revenue. It helps the team leader understand the monetary impact of not meeting SLA, of having an attrition rate that's high, of having absenteeism that's high, how that impacts the P&L of their team specifically, and ultimately how it impacts the business. Phase 1 commences with a pre-test that happens, and then it ends with a post-test, and it enables just an assessment of the individual performance, the challenges that they face, and the opportunities for support and guidance during what happens in phase 2. Then in phase 2, this is the practical application. So they have an opportunity to implement their learnings and commit to improving certain metrics within the organization. And so they've got to decide what 2 metrics they're going to work on using the learning that they got in phase 1. And there are 55 tasks that are completed over a period of 8 weeks. There's a daily task that gets happened, there's weekly tasks, and there's monthly tasks. So they've got to hold team briefings, they've got to do coaching trackers, they've got to look at how they calibrate on the bottom quartile of performers. They also do the performance reviews, they do coaching, and all of this is guided through the process of that 8-week period, and this accounts towards 30% of their accreditation. And then phase 3 is from the classroom to the boardroom. This is where they have a slot for 20 minutes to senior management. They outline those 2 metrics that they chose in the beginning of phase 2, the impact on operational effectiveness, how it can be improved, so what they've done over the 8 weeks and what their proposal is, and that counts towards 20% of the accreditation for the management segment of the leadership development program. And then when we look at the leadership segment overview, I think this for me is so important. Leadership has always been fundamental to me, to what I do as an individual, how I've worked through the contact center ranks. For those of you that don't know, I mean, I've been in contact centers for 22 years, but it was so important that I had a strong foundation in leadership, because that's what got me to love the industry, what got me to love the sector, and more importantly, to love the people, because I know the journey that they walked from agent to team leader. So with this particular program and how it encompasses everything is that they start off with self-awareness, and that is the first step in the development of emotional intelligence. And through the first step of getting their insights discovery personal profile, attendees are now able to progress through to the stages of, number 1, building their brand, having a full understanding of who they are, how they interact with others. By the end of module 1, everyone is clear about what their personal leadership brand stands for and how they can stand out in everything that they do. Discovering inspirational leadership then takes the delegates' self-awareness, personal brand, and self-leadership into the leadership of others, because only once you've kind of mastered that self-leadership model are you able to then start leading others. This then moves into the 3rd module, which combines the self-awareness, social awareness, and enables the attendee to use the awareness of their emotions and the emotions of others to manage interactions successfully. Module 4 then teaches them how to manage conflict so that it can serve as a catalyst, because conflict is not necessarily bad. Conflict is good. It helps us uncover where we've got pitfalls. And if we look at it from that perspective, it's not a hindrance. When we look at it as a catalyst, if we're able to facilitate the conflict in a way that's meaningful, we're able to come up with solutions to those pitfalls, to those blind spots that we don't necessarily see. And this then enhances the organization, the team, and the individual development. And I think that's fundamentally important. Then module 5 teaches them how to create an environment that encourages and promotes self-motivation. Now, I know, and you know, that you can't motivate somebody, that you can only create the environment that this happens in. And this introduces the insights team effectiveness model to identify the most pressing and most important issues for the team's development, to be able to diagnose problems, and to highlight opportunities to improve the team's success. The last one is around leadership modeling, and this one gets done through Lego Serious Play. So if you're like me and you have a whole bunch of Lego pieces built into Disney characters around the house, then you'd enjoy this particular module, because what you do is you build a personal development strategy through Lego Serious Play. Using this methodology just deepens the reflection process on the delicate self-awareness, their strengths and opportunities for development to build a forward view of their leadership journey. And I think that in a nutshell covers what this program entails, and how it is run. And it really is there to fast track that leadership journey. So we are busy negotiating a price with the provider, because the pilot that was run was pegged at a certain amount. And if you are keen on sending your people through or putting your people through this, I will be sharing the full prospectus of the development program with everyone on the call. And I'll be reaching out to you just to see your propensity to utilize the program. But ultimately, until we start developing leaders within our organizations, we're going to sit with the talent crisis. We're going to sit with the leadership talent crisis. And to Reshni's earlier point, a problem where people are now demanding much higher salaries because they know that their skill is something that is needed and in demand. But there hasn't been an organization who has embarked on an internal leadership development strategy that has gone wrong. They've only seen growth and were able to grow based on the strength of their leadership team. With that, if there are any questions, I know I've eaten a little bit into Samkelo's time. So let me know. Yeah, let me know if there are any questions. Thanks, Samkelo.
I'm happy to take just one question from the audience. So to be fair, sure, that was very good. Are there any questions for Shona from the audience? It looks like it was a very good presentation, because I'm not seeing any questions or clarity from the audience. Thank you very much, Shona. That was a very good presentation. Nita, you've come back on the floor.
Hi, Shona. Thanks so much for your information. My question is that on all these programs or leadership programs that you are talking about, is accreditation or credits towards a qualification not imperative for this?
So this is an accredited program. This is accredited to a 5-star certification, and it is accredited by CETA. So that information will sit in the document that I share with everyone. And then when we have our next discussion, or when we have our next HR forum, I'll also introduce some non-accredited learning that in partnership with Bpesa. And then, we'll continue this leadership track. We're always looking for ways in which to enhance that leadership level. This is one of the programs that we found to be very successful. There's some amazing results and testimonials from BPOs within the Bpesa membership realm. And it's proven. We've seen some success from people that have gone through this program that have now also been promoted into management roles. So it talks of enormous success, and it was only run, I think, a year ago. So within the space of a year, there's been promotion into management, etc. And we are tracking those candidates very carefully.
Okay, so can I just ask you, the two companies that are involved is Tula and ST and?
Yes.
Okay, are those both South African providers?
I will double check, but I think they are.
Okay.
So they are South African providers that have accredited global training. So I know Tula is the only organization that does it for Sub-Saharan Africa. And the program that they've got is an internationally accredited program, but they are a local provider.
Okay, cool. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Nita.
Cheers.
All good. If there are no other questions, this has been a very good session. We began by the CEO address. We had a discussion around HR trends and practices from Deborah in UK. We also have been doing some polls. Thank you, Mpumi. You've been a star and just keeping up the feedback and the results. Well done, Pumi. And then Tracy came to speak to us about impact sourcing and inclusive hiring, why we're good in those, but also what we need to do practically as well. And just now, Shaw was speaking to us around leadership development, why we need that, and what is the benefit to our businesses. So far, so good. It's definitely been a very good session. We want to have another HR forum based upon the feedback you've given. We'll cover some of the themes before the end of the year. So around about November, we'll have our last HR forum for 2022. So on behalf of Bpesa, thank you very much for coming and attending. I hope it has added value to all of you. Time now is exactly 11:56. So the myth that there's a thing called African time does not apply because we are finishing early. Am I missing out any comments, Mpumi and Sam from the chat? No, I don't. There are none from the chat. Thank you very much. Thanks, Shaw. Thanks, Tracy. And also thanks to Rashni and Deborah as well. Enjoy the rest of your day, colleagues. Keep well.
Cheers, everyone.